there's a constant risk of different types of hybrid threats, cyber attacks. As long as North America and Europe stand together, we are by far the strongest military force in the world.
US Secretary General navigated the first Trump term of office. Is NATO going to survive the second?
My experience with President Trump is that he's actually more critical against NATO allies than against NATO.
Jens Stoltenberg, many years as Secretary General of NATO, and now this book recounting those years. Is this a memoir or more of a warning and a manifesto?
I will say it's both, and most of all, it's a book where I try to be honest and transparent and open about what happened in NATO. Both the successes, the unprecedented support to Ukraine, but also the failures, and also the biggest reinforcement of collective defense in a generation, but also the need to do much more. So, yeah, or that we're able to defeat ISIS in Iraq and Syria, but also the failure in Afghanistan. So I believe in transparency, I believe in openness, especially in a democratic institution like NATO. We need that to build the trust. We need to continue to have the necessary support for NATO.
So much of what was happening while you were Secretary General is still happening. Is NATO getting on top of it? Are they learning the lessons? Are things better than when you were there?
Things have significantly improved over the last years, and the main reason is, of course, that after 2014, after the illegal annexation of Crimea, and Russia went into Donbass for the first time, NATO allies started to realize that this is serious. So, of course, we could have done it faster, we could have done even more, but over these years, we have implemented the biggest reinforcement of collective defense. We have now combat-ready battle groups in the eastern part of the alliance. We didn't have that before, and allies are also starting to invest more in defense. But it's still a lot we have to do, so we're not where we should be, but we're in a much better place than a few years ago.
US Secretary General navigated the first Trump term of office. Is NATO going to survive the second?
I believe so. Of course, we never have any 100% guarantees for anything in life, but my experience with President Trump is that he's actually more critical against NATO allies than against NATO. He criticized NATO allies for not paying enough for NATO. And the good news is that NATO allies have started. Not so many years ago, it was almost only the United States, United Kingdom, and a few others that met the 2% target of 2% of GDP spending on defense. Now, this is totally different. So I think this will help to preserve and to ensure continued US commitment to NATO.
But it was more than just the money, wasn't it? I mean, there were serious doubts during Trump's first term about whether he really was committed to Article 5, whether he really could imagine putting American troops in harm's way for the defense of the Baltics, for example, whether he could ever imagine launching a nuclear strike if that was what was required under mutually assured destruction. This comes through to some degree in your book as well. Is this something we should worry about?
Again, in the book I tried to be open, and there have been difficult discussions. I tried to bring people into the room where actually things happened, and we have, for instance, a very dramatic summit in 2018 where President Trump also told the allies that he was prepared to leave the alliance because we were not paying. But now, the United States, President Trump, for instance, at the latest NATO summit in Den Haag this year, was very strong and committed very clearly to NATO and to Article 5, our collective defense clause. And more importantly, we see that the US has continued to have troops in Europe, part of the battle groups and the presence in the eastern part of the alliance. And I think it also is in the self-interest of the United States to preserve NATO, because in NATO, the United States has something Russia and China doesn't have at all, and that's more than 30 friends and allies. And it makes the United States safer to have all the friends and allies it has in NATO.
Does Mark Rutte, your successor, have an easier job than you had, or a harder one?
I think it's very hard to compare. The main task of any Secretary General of NATO is to ensure that the alliance stay together, because as long as North America and Europe stand together, we are by far the strongest military force in the world. We represent 50% of the world's military might and 50% of the world's economic might. So standing together is the key to preserve peace and remain safe.
Let's talk about current threats, very real threats, hybrid threats. Is NATO under direct threat from Russia, do you believe?
I think we need to distinguish. NATO doesn't see, and that's still the case also after I left, any imminent threat of a military attack against any NATO allied country, because we are strong, we have credible deterrence. But there's a constant risk of different types of hybrid threats, cyber attacks, sabotage, hostile actions, violation of airspace. And we just need to increase our readiness, we need to improve our intelligence, we need to improve our cyber capabilities to counter these hybrid attacks, which are below the level of Article 5, but still very serious.
You talk about countering these threats. How do you deter these threats?
I think, first of all, they are very different, but it's harder to deter cyber attacks and sabotage than full-fledged military attacks. Second, it's about also sending a clear message about being transparent and actually attribute that we know this is Russia when we have precise intelligence, and expose them and also take actions. So people have been arrested, there have been court cases around in NATO countries against people who we believe are responsible for instance, sabotage actions against infrastructure in NATO countries.
Let's take one example, the very serious incursion into Estonian airspace by Russian fighters recently. If that sort of behaviour continues, should those fighters be shot down?
Well, I think we need to react to those incursions, airspace violations in a firm but also calm way. I trust the military commanders and the military authorities to make the right operational decisions. Over Poland, when we had many drones coming into Polish airspace, they were actually shot down, many of them, by NATO air defense systems, Dutch F-35s, German Patriots, and other NATO systems over Poland. My own country, Norway, we have experienced 3 airspace violations this year. We have a kind of long knowledge of how to deal with that, and we send up Norwegian planes, we intercept, we escort the Russian planes sometimes out of, or at least the vicinity of our airspace, so Norwegian air territory. So I think the important thing is to react in a measured, calm way and be firm, and then adapt how we react to the specific situation we face.
Is the European Union idea of building a drone wall a sensible one, a sensible use of resources?
Well, I think European countries and also the European Union can do more to provide different air and missile defense capabilities. But I think NATO is the best framework, because we need the sensors, we need the satellites, we need all the different capabilities on the ground. And there is an integrated NATO air and missile defense. And there are important US capabilities, there are Norwegian capabilities, there are Turkish capabilities, and all this has to be integrated. So NATO should remain the framework for air and missile defense, not least because key European countries are not EU members. But the EU can help to provide the capabilities we need to provide to have this credible air and missile defense.
On the border with Russia, in the Baltics, in Poland, there are British forces, American forces, NATO forces. Is there a real threat that in the nearish future, Russian forces could cross that border?
Again, as long as I was Secretary General of NATO, and that's also my impression, clear understanding that that's still the case, NATO didn't see any imminent threat of a military attack on a NATO allied country. And that's because our deterrence is credible.
And given what's happening in Ukraine, are they capable of such an attack?
So by far, the NATO is much stronger militarily than Russia. So the only question is whether we have a credible deterrence that actually we are able to convey to Moscow that there is no doubt we will be there to counter an attack on a NATO ally. And the reason why we, for instance, have the battle group in Estonia led by the United Kingdom, and why we have increased the military presence of NATO troops in the East in general, is to remove any room for misunderstanding or miscalculation in Moscow about our readiness to fight.
So it's as much about avoiding accidents as it is about deterring a full-scale invasion?
In one way, it's about both. Preventing accidents or miscalculations, but also, of course, preventing any planned big-scale military attack on any NATO ally. NATO has done that successfully for many years, since 1949. And the success of NATO is not measured in the number of wars we win or the number of wars we wage. It's about the success of NATO is to prevent war, is to avoid war. And we do that by conveying a very strong message of deterrence, and increased military presence in the East sends a very clear signal of that determination.
One final big picture question. We know that what's happening in America goes way beyond Trump. Their focus on China, loss of commitment to European defence, America first, goes way beyond Trump. Should Europe be preparing now for European defence without America? And I know that the Secretary General could, and as Secretary General, you always had to absolutely stick to the line that you wouldn't consider such a thing. But now that you're moved on beyond that, do you think that, and do you tell European leaders privately, that we ought to be ready for the day when we have to look after defence without America?
So what I tell European leaders today, and what I also told them when I was Secretary General of NATO, is that we need to invest more in European defence capabilities. We need to make European defences stronger. That will partly help us to increase the likelihood that the US will stay, because the main reason why there is some frustration in the United States is that they have felt that Europeans have not paid their fair share. So the more we pay, the more likely it is that the United States stays. If they leave, which I don't think they will do, but of course no one can guarantee that 100%, if they leave, then it's even more important that we have increased our investments in defense.
But it goes beyond that, doesn't it? Because there are certain capabilities that we leave to the Americans, essential capabilities that we have always left to the Americans. Should we now be equipping ourselves with those capabilities in case the Americans go?
Not primarily because we believe the Americans will leave, but we need to have a more full spectrum European defense because the United States has carried a too big burden of the total defense of Europe. And also, we have to realize that what happens in Asia matters for Europe. So this idea that if the United States looks to Asia, it's a problem for Europe. Well, security is not regional. Security is global, and we see that in Ukraine. China is upholding the Russian war economy. North Korean troops are fighting inside Ukraine, a European country, and Iran has been a key enabler with the drones of the Russian warfare. So Europe and United States have to stand together, and that's to address threats coming from all directions. And the stronger we are, the more united we will be.
Perfect. Jens Stoltenberg, thanks very much indeed.
Thanks for having me.